have been extensive on this. Hopefully, we can take advantage during the Q&A sessions, the Q&A session, and talk about a bit how things are in Central America, and how can you better prepare for accessing this market. And I'll go in generals. I will not talk about specific markets, even though we will cover the main markets in this region. But then probably we can discuss the opportunities and how things are moving now in the region of Central America. So some of you know us. We are Imalings. We are the in-country representative for Usara. Have been working with Usara for 18 years now, and we provide many services to help you access the market in this region. We have operation in 8 countries, and we cover most of them, through Usara. So we provide market intelligence, which is, market reports or information, general information. We have contact with the industry. That way we are able to recruit buyers and get information from trade and develop trade leads that some of you may get. If you are not, please register at usara.org so you can get the trade leads that we obtain when we do these visits. We have successfully been able to get beer to Guatemala, snacks to Costa Rica, produce items to Costa Rica, and many others to Mexico. But that's what we do. We also do consumer programs and trade marketing strategies and PR and communication. But those are beyond what we do now with Usara. We are focusing with this region to develop the relationship between U.S. exporters, Western U.S. exporters, and the Latin American trade. And we are doing that by having a trade show in Mexico, where all Latin American buyers go, which is a retail trade show in March. We do several trade missions going to the U.S. Actually, we finished one last week, and I believe some of you were involved in that one. And also, we do outbound trade missions. So the idea is to have exchange, have direct contact between the buyers and the sellers. So you are able to again know the market and develop these relationships, which is very important in this and any other market. So going straight into Central America, and again, it's hard. I didn't put the size of it, but you can tell by the number of inhabitants that Central America is a moderate size region. We cover 7 countries here, and they have 53 million inhabitants. This is about less than a half of what Mexico has. Obviously, smaller than Brazil, smaller than South America that we covered, and 1/7 of the U.S. Again, it's a small, but it's concentrated. And even though it may look like a smaller market, there are niches and there are consumers, even countries that are attractive for U.S. products. But as with any country in Latin America, we've had relationship with the U.S. and consumer products for many years. So coming into this market is not that easy. You need to be prepared, and that's what we tell all our exporters. A GDP of $362 billion combined, which again is smaller. And the 7 countries that comprise the region, Belize, Costa Rica, Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. So basically, is all the region that connects Mexico and Colombia. It's everything in between Mexico and Colombia. We're not covering the Caribbean here, but you can also consider ish Jamaica and the Dominican Republic, which is another interesting market. It's highly regarded for food service because of their tourism industry, but it's very centralized, and sometimes it's hard to access because of its location. But anyway, we'll cover these markets here. And even though we're talking about seven different countries, and we say that with every region, it may be smaller than the US, but still you're talking about 7 different economies, different systems that they may have similarities, and obviously they speak Spanish, but just the language will not define the region. And just by speaking Spanish or being to Mexico or being to one of these countries, you can assume that you know them all because they all have their differences, they have their culture, they have their regulations, and even though again they're a bit consistent overall, we need to understand the differences between them more so than the rest. So there are many main cities that probably some of you have visited. So we have Guatemala City with 3 million people. Again, compared to cities in other countries in Mexico or South America, well, this is a big city. I mean, it's large enough, but Guatemala is pretty much the center of the country. Other characteristic that you will have in these countries is that are more centralized countries in general, and that happens throughout Latin America. So you have Guatemala City with 3 million people, Panama City with almost two, which is half of the population, Tegucigalpa in Honduras, San Jose in Costa Rica, 1.4, again, half of the population, San Salvador, Managua, San Pedro Sula, Alajuela, and Heredia. And actually, Alajuela is very close to San Jose. But here, this let's say this size also is an advantage because you have that centralized country that pretty much you're selling to one major city, and then you have secondary distribution to the rest. So here we will talk more about probably San Jose, Costa Rica, Panama, and maybe in Guatemala, and I'll explain that in a moment with the economy. If you see all of the countries have access to the sea and all of the countries have access to the Pacific Ocean. However, because of the size, it can be complicated to have full containers or regular full containers shipped to this. So again, one benefit is that the logistic chain is there and the seaports are there, but you have to consider two things. One is the frequency of shipments, and two is the quantity that this market um, could consume of your products. Again, 3 million people in Guatemala is very sizable, but from that you have to consider also the socioeconomic levels into each. Again, as with any of these seminars, we're not trying to discourage you. It's try to get you information and find the opportunity. It's there, but it has to be worked on. It's not, again, not a huge market. And somebody said before, it's not a Friday afternoon market. You need to work this. Again, you have some ports. Obviously, Panama Canal is the largest crossing point. Not sure, well, at least in America. Costa Rica, you have Limon in the Pacific, Honduras, Cortés, Santo Tomas, Puerto Barrios, and Quetzal in Guatemala. And in Costa Rica, you have Caldera in the south. So most of them are in the Pacific, which makes it easier to ship from the western U.S. states, even though you have to cross all the way down from the U.S. to Mexico, obviously through Mexico or in front of Mexico, and then get to this region. But again, we in our research we found that most of the big sea lines have a frequency to these countries, and probably I'll pick your brain because I know some of you have exported to this region, just to understand, if that has been a challenge on getting competitive prices and also to getting the frequencies that you need. Now the economies. Again, we talked about 7 different markets, but without being disrespectful to all the countries and the economies, there are 3 that are the top tier and are that have the higher potential, even though other countries can have specific opportunities for specific categories. But here we're talking about the overall market. Here on the left bottom side, you can see the GDP per capita. That is the income per person in each country. So you can see that Guatemala, it's above, it's a little bit higher than $6,000 per year per person. Then you have Honduras, Nicaragua, and Salvador, which are lower income. But then you have 2 countries that are Costa Rica and Panama that are way above the median, the average, and they are the ones that have the highest potential again as a whole. Again, we need to understand the singularities of each country, but here you have Costa Rica and Panama, and then Belize. So if we break this down and we think, oh, obviously, I should go to Guatemala, well, Costa Rica, Panama, Costa Rica, and then Guatemala, we need to review a bit deeper just to see how is their population. Because yes, Guatemala has a lower GDP per capita, but their population is much higher. So this could have an opportunity for commodity type products That could be produce, dairy, or other, large volume ingredients, grains, because you have the population, and obviously the GDP per capita is lower, but it's still, a wealthy and healthy country. You're talking in Guatemala about 110 million people. Still, the economy itself, it's not as prosperous as other countries. Then you have again Honduras and Nicaragua. On top right you see the population, and the bottom right you see the GDP. A lot of population, but low GDP. That happens in Honduras, Nicaragua. Gets a bit balanced off with Salvador, but still low. But then you see Costa Rica, where you have less population. You have about 5 million people, and then you have a a total GDP of over 60 billion US dollars. And Panama, with even less population, 4 million people, but much higher GDP, obviously because of all the financial, trading, and logistical benefits that country has. But again, is okay, yes, you have high income. They're open. There's more retail, but still, it's a Latin American country. There are differences between social classes, and also it's a small country with only 4 million people, compared to one like Mexico with 130 or Brazil with 300. So again, good opportunity, but it has to be developed. And again, we'll be talking about these countries, on and off. Now, we have done many events to these missions, and actually the USARA program is focused not only in Mexico anymore, or before we had it separated, we did only Mexico or Central America. Now we're combining, especially with the events that we're doing. So if you participate in these events, you will see a mix of Mexican and all the rest of Latin American buyers. Right now, we are focusing on Colombia going up, but we're starting recruiting all buyers from other countries like Chile, Brazil, maybe Peru. But again, that's in the works because we have to reestablish those relationships, especially in South America, because of COVID. We had contact with them, but we need to re-energize that relationship and get new buyers for you to meet either at the trade shows, the outbound missions, or going up to the inbound missions. Now, in general, what are we talking about? And I've covered some of these points. First is, the geographic scope and population. It's a young region, a small region, but it's evolving. And when I say that you have a higher low income consumer base, then basically it is. But again, there are niche markets, and there is a middle class that is growing. Then we have the economic growth and development trends, has been steady. As with any other country, economy and politics play a part, and they have played a part in every country in Latin America. I'm speaking to you from Mexico now. Well, we're on the news, or maybe we're not, but now, politically there are comments, and now it could be Mexico. 2 years ago, could have been Argentina. Uh, Actually, in 2018 or 2019, when we went in this region, there was some agitation in Panama, but it didn't last long. So one of the things is that the news will not reflect the overall climate of this market. Obviously, we need to understand what is happening, but unless there is a relevant change in regulation or legislation, basically news just pass, and business continues as usual. Fortunately, the industry that we're in, food and beverage, is not as affected as other industries. So we're the last one to get affected and the first one to recover. But obviously, with these changes, there is reconfiguration in the market. Now, the consumers in general, they are looking for healthier, more convenient, and higher quality food and beverage products. But again, that will happen with the middle and middle high class. We have talked about this in other parts of Latin America. Here, you will see it more specific to countries. You'll see it more in Panama, or in middle high class in Costa Rica. Guatemala has some of it, but is not as widespread as the other countries. So these changes in healthier habits and more modernized, let's say more healthier or new trendier products, you'll see them more in Panama, Costa Rica, in some extent in Guatemala, It doesn't mean that they don't have them in the other countries like Nicaragua and the others, but it's not as widespread as the others that I mentioned. And as with anyone, they will look for processed foods, beverages, snacks, and dairy products. The product coming in from the U.S. Is regarded as high quality, but the cost will be very important. You know, the price will be very important. And as we have said before, we need to take a good look to the landed cost so you understand how much your product will retail for, and know that you will not be out of the market because of the price and all the logistical costs. Now, what hurdles could we have in this region? Tariffs are not a big deal anymore because of the CAFTA, which is the Central America Free Trade Agreement. But there are non-tariff barriers, and there are some quotas, and especially with agro-industrial products, Central America, some countries in Central America have imposed tariffs, or sorry, non-tariff barriers with some items. So it's a we need to understand what are the requirements, and the two items that we need to check is if there is a tariff. If there is not a tariff because of the CAFTA, it will be free, zero tariff. But if it doesn't, and or if there is a sensitive category like some dairy items, some produce items, we're talking about potatoes, onions, some corn, that could have some tax or could have a more restrict regulation to import because they're protecting their crops. That's something that all Latin Americans seem to do. There was a case with onions in Costa Rica, and they were prohibited for some time. There were quotas at some time, and now it looks like they're back to normal. Trade has resumed, but again, it causes disruption in trade. So it's very important to get back to these markets every often just to see if anything changed, because sometimes the buyers just lose the context of who could supply, and there's a good opportunity for you. Logistics and transportation are challenging. I mentioned that before, the volume, the infrastructure of the frequency product coming to the region, and also the road infrastructure could be limited. I remember Costa Rica had a plate that they had on a main road in San Jose, and it took them 3 years to fix. So I'm not criticizing. Well, I am criticizing. I'm not criticizing the country, but basically it can take longer times to get that. And there has been modernization, especially Panama, Colombia, and Costa Rica. Sorry, Panama, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. But you may find challenges in distribution, especially in the secondary roads or secondary cities. One thing that is predominant in the region is that you have more competitors, and US exporters face more competition from regional producers and these international brands. We actually saw Cargill with a consumer brand, which Cargill, to me in general, they did more the commodities and the big company, but they have one company called Cinta Azul, I think, and they sell hams and cold meats and refrigerated and dairy products. So you may find international brands that have been established there for many years, and again, you're farther from the U.S. and they are closer to South America. So you may have you will face more competition from that region. We saw it with popcorn, with some grains. They have sourcing from Uruguay, Brazil, or Argentina, and because the freight is very similar, and even though the quality is not the same than in the U.S., well, it passes, so they have a benefit with the cost, and obviously the differences. And I'll talk about it. If you speak English, that is not enough. If you've been to one country, doesn't mean that you've met all of them. We need to understand better the culture and better the trade etiquette that each country will have. Yes, they will not be the most punctual executives in the world. Uh, I understand the part of relationship, and the Latin culture is more, open. But in general, everybody, even the U.S. and any country, will do business with the one that they feel comfortable with. So there is not that much of a barrier. It's more being respectful and understanding the differences of cultures that may be between the U.S. and other countries. So those are the main hurdles. Now, talking about markets, we talked briefly talked about the ones that that you need to focus on. These are in alphabetical order, so there are some good and bad, but I'll just talk real quick. If you take a look at those pictures, you could think, oh, the middle one is Mexico. Well, no, it's actually it's Guatemala. Oh, the bottom one looks like Miami or Veracruz. It's Panama. The one on top is San Jose, Costa Rica. So you'll see again a developed country is not that they're underdeveloped in general. There are some regions that have opportunity and they need more support or more development. But in general, the big cities are big. In the countries in general, again, they could be centralized, but that's something to consider. Now we have Costa Rica with strong economy and growing middle class. They like branded food products. They are closer to what you see in other Latin American markets or in general. They are looking for new trendy products. You have a couple of retail chains that are looking for differentiation, even organic products. So Costa Rica is a good market to explore, but don't think that they will go overboard for the products. Yes, the products will be there, and actually there are some retailers that carry imported products, but again, it's a more value conscious region. So they will have luxury items, but they will be more careful. And also they have imported products from the big brands. So you will be competing to these with these big brands. Guatemala, again, largest market with in GDP and with population, but they have a preference for US brands. Same thing with specialized items or differentiated items, but you need to get value to them. Otherwise, you will look as too expensive. Salvador, they're developing, they're increasing. Honduras, same thing. They're growing in tourism. Actually, their natural reserves and their resorts areas are growing in Honduras specifically, similar to what happened in Costa Rica 15, 20 years ago, and also Nicaragua. Um, Nicaragua actually, it says proximity to the U.S. Well, they're not close to the U.S., but they have been attractive for food and beverage manufacturing because the wages and the labor is more economic. So you may have more production there, and there are production hubs in Nicaragua that source the other countries. Finally, Panama, we talked about it, logistics hub, and the taste of international cuisine and the number of restaurants and retailers that are working in Panama is increasing. There is even an organic chain that increased dramatically after pandemic. So yes, that's a market that is a good opportunity. And also the three main supermarkets in Panama, Rey 99, that's the name of the retailer, and River Smith, they are also working on modernizing their stores. And in time, we know that they will look for new products, similar to what happened in Mexico or Chile some years ago, even Colombia some years ago. So Panama, of all of these, I think Panama has the largest potential, and Costa Rica could be second. But again, there's potential, but many people will think the same. So the offering can be a bit overwhelming at times for the buyers. Now, what is the best way to access this market? And I would tell you upfront, use the resources that you have at hand, USDA and WUSARA. Why? Because again, it can be tricky, and regulations and standards are stable in general, but they tend to change with each administration, and it varies. You have governments 4-year administrations or 6-year administrations, depends. So they may make tweaks, especially on the imported products or on the regulations or labeling. That's where we have seen it the most. Actually, Panama, about 4 or 5 years, changed their legislation, and registration of products took a year and a half. So it may take time, especially on the registration process, because they want to make sure that all the products that come into the market are properly handled, and then they don't affect the domestic industry. Understand these regulations and standards, again, with the help of USDA. We have some contacts for you afterwards. build this partnership, and it takes patience. And many of you have seen it. Actually, I think there's Gary Stenberg and Greg from Colorado. We were in a trade mission, 2019, I think, with a buyer of a retail store. They kept in contact, and it took 3 or 4 years for them to close the deal. So again, a lot of patience here, but you do need to have the one-on-one contact at least once, so they get to know you, and obviously the email chain comes back and forth. I think Jacob was here, but he knows that you have to really work the market and be there present. We still see family-oriented businesses. We see the father passing on to the next generation, and it was very curious because we run three trade missions for Wusara, bringing buyers to the U.S. And in every mission, we had one executive that was younger than 25 years old, very well prepared, but very young. So you still see, for instance, in Dominica, you have the Polanco family. In Panama, well, you have the Sanetatos. I think they sold their business. In Costa Rica, you'll have one or two companies that are family owned. You see other, higher, more corporate organized companies, but you still see that, that it's a family that started the business 50 years ago. Now the son is working there, and they have the next generation working on this. Uh, Leverage free trade agreements. Again, Panama. One benefit with Panama is that the economy is dollarized. So you sell in dollars, you receive dollars, and also the other countries again have a benefit that shifts from paying 20% tariff to paying no tariff. And also the marketing investment, because your brands are not known in that market. Maybe they are. Just be careful that because you are well known in the US, they will know your brands. We have seen that many times. The leading brand, we're the leading bean brand in the US. Well, not in these markets. So you need to be careful on that position or relative position that you may have. You could be surprised because there are brands, US brands, that actually are very well positioned, sometimes more than in the US. And if you visit, have a plan. It is nice. We have seen people, especially the ones that did the mission or were on the Peace Corps, that they know and they have been there and they take unnecessary risks. Nothing has happened, but you don't have to just try to be an explorer in the city in the middle of the night. So just be careful there, and again, focus on business. There are plenty of places to visit, but again, just try to keep it safe and moderate. When you visit any of these countries. Now, what are the main trade barriers? We talked about it. I just talked about it. The non-tariff barriers. They can include the import licensing requirements, and that is the hardest issue for U.S. companies. I remember it was Costa Rica and Panama. Again, the one that took the longest, and trying to have those technical standards harmonized, because their calorie intake is different, the labeling regulations are different, and sometimes the custom procedures can be harder, especially on the first transaction. So as we have recommended in other seminars of this series, just make sure that you make a mock operation in coordination with your importer and the customs agent, so you understand what details could be needed and what taxes and things could be done. Again, don't ever pay outside the process. It's better for you to just go the process itself, so you can get things done. And intellectual property rights, they are evolving in Central America, but they're not completely implemented. So just be careful that you have your brands registered in these countries. It's difficult now to have problems with brands. I think the main issue that you could have is that if your product is not registered in certain country, one law firm will register it for you without telling you, and they will try to charge you to get those rights. So just make sure that you have the intellectual property covered, especially in these countries if you're planning to explore this market. And also, as we say, and we'll talk about it later, use us if you need general information. We cannot provide a specific buyer's list, and we don't recommend doing it. It's just giving you a phone book. But it's more on talking about the strategy and what countries would you like to explore. We can help you with the basics, probably do it through, mostly do it through Usara. And then we can help you with just tracking and doing anything, anything in general. So those are the main things that we have, and obviously economy, but we'll talk about economy in a bit. Now, I talked about the sanitary and phytosanitary standards. Just make sure that you have them. They're not that different from the US, but they can have its singularities, starting with the language. They may, they will ask for the regular documents. Again, it's not a crazy thing or crazy market. It's more about the local forms that would need to be filled. That's where you would need help or assistance from the customs agent or the potential importer, so you fill them out right. Because as they are bureaucratic, they may not be online, or they may not be as quick as you would expect. So having an error and having the permit rejected from the authority can take you 6 months and then start over. So that's where we need we need you to be very careful, especially in these three items. Labeling requirements as well. I mentioned that in South America, we are implementing in all Latin America these ugly octagons where it says all the bad things, well, not the bad things, all the added things that food will have. So you have excess fat, excess saturated fat, excess sodium, excess sugar. So those are implemented in more countries. They don't have a real impact. Well, the government information says that they have not impacted the trade, but there are some industries that, hey, they have said that the trade has been affected by 10%. So again, 10% is not that bad, but could affect your branding, especially because these boxes have to be in the front. So you need to make sure that your labeling could stand them or adapt them, so you don't lose that, again, that branding and the information that is key for consumers to eat your products or consume your products. And others are, finally, the tariff rate quotas that are seasonal or could be based on a certain administration. Again, I put the example of the onions in Costa Rica, or of the chicken potato in Costa Rica. That was more because of a plague, a nematode. There was no plague, but they wanted to protect themselves, so they pretty much blocked the chipping potatoes for Costa Rica for a long time. Now they're open with onions, but they had them closed a couple of years ago because their crop was was affected. So they wanted to ensure that the domestic growers would get benefited from that. So you still see that, there's free trade, but there are some national regulations to protect the crops, especially because most of the agricultural industry is on the basic stage, and they're more on a survival crops. That is, families that work and pretty much sell their crops and not sell directly. But anyway, that's something that you need to consider into this market. Another thing that has to be considered is that the ports, as they are small, they don't have the efficiency or the infrastructure that larger ports will have. So it's very common to have delays in port operations. It is not recommended to ship by by ground, by trailer, because it's too far, and you have to cross four or five different borders. The roads are not there. There is not a lot of security in some parts of the way there. So it has to be shipped mainly by ship. So this will cause that there will be delays. Just make sure that you have an extra planned, some room for this in your cost or your quotations. Cold chain is limited, and we see that from Mexico all the way down to Colombia. Probably, I think Brazil has developed better, but cold chain in general can be inadequate. Again, just make sure that you have all the tracking systems, that the reefer are well connected. But yeah, we have seen that, and in some store checks, it was very notorious to see in retail stores how especially the refrigerated products, 80% of them had condensation, and condensation comes with some disruption in the cold chain. So that happens very often. Consider that these countries will have a tropical weather, and tropical, I mean, it can be hot or it can be humid, very humid. So your product, just make sure that your product also holds with the environment itself, holds well. And as I said, secondary roads can be difficult, and some resort areas are affected by this, especially in Costa Rica. Very nice resorts, but getting there it's hard. So basically, you have more specialized distributors that could source these resort areas, especially in Costa Rica. Now, what else do we have? Again, I don't mean to, I mean, again, I can speak wonders of this region. We have been there many, many times and it's beautiful and we have very good friends and we have done good, I mean, we have helped Western US companies to do good business there. But again, I'd rather to tell you the details because the nice part, you can figure it out. Price sensitivity, it's more acute, more, it's stronger here than in Mexico, for instance. I mean, Mexico is price sensitive, but here they are more price sensitive. So it's good to keep track first of exchange rate. We have said many times that exchange rate is the driver for imported product purchase, but also the inflation rates and yeah, basically the inflation is what will drive this economy. In 2021, they had an increase in inflation as all the countries did. Now it's stable. There are some countries where it's increasing a bit. I read, Costa Rica has some and Guatemala has some. We're talking about 8, 9 points. But just be mindful of that. And you may have that excuse. Oh, the inflation. Well, it's not really an excuse, but you can work through it. But yes, be mindful that the buyers and consumers will be price sensitive to imported products. They will compete with lower price domestic and regional products, but as in any economy, I think in the world, there's a segment, the middle and middle high, that will basically, they will go over the price and will look more for quality. So it's a game of recognizing these importers or these retailers that will go to a higher end consumer base. They are not as segmented as other countries, like in the US or Mexico, but you may have some AMPM or Automercado in Costa Rica that they serve, the medium and high end areas, but they're not again as specialized. So that's something probably down the road you would need to talk to the buyer or to the importer saying, I want to be in whole retail, but I want to focus specifically in these type of stores. As I mentioned, they have preference for local brands because they have been there for 100 and 120 years. Again, Cargill, Unilever, Procter, all those brands have been there for many, many years. And also because of the isolation that these countries had uh, in the 20th century and all the changes politically and economically speaking, some companies were developed in each country, so they have more and more uh, market share there. And as I said, careful with the competition because everyone will send product, and you will find even Mexican products, Brazilian, European, some dairy products from New Zealand. So that happens. Again, they're in the middle. So the advantage that you may have with other countries like Canada or Mexico, here it starts to fade slowly. So again, just be careful with that. And talked about it. The currency fluctuations. I was checking exchange rate this morning, and it's higher, but I think that's an overall trend. It's increasing and it's adjusting. It has to do with the Fed and all the global economy things that are happening. But again, just be mindful of the exchange rate. Doesn't go too crazy. Again, in Panama, you don't have this problem because it's dollarized, but you have an inflation factor that you don't have in the U.S. And political uncertainty. This I would probably be cautious on how we manage it because there has not been real political uncertainty. It's more about the elections. And as with anywhere in the world, the electoral processes are becoming more aggressive in general, more polarized. It's not only Mexico or the US or France or it all across the board. I said that in another seminar that 2024 is one of those strange years where one of each, but half of the voter base in the world will go to the to the ballots. So there were elections in many countries. Fortunately, in Central America, I don't think we have a major election coming soon. We had a couple 1 or 2 years ago, but they're stable and they have not been really relevant in changes or affectation to international trade. And natural disasters that fortunately, well, not in this season, but we've had them. They've had them in the region, especially the ones hit from the Atlantic. And this could affect the islands, mostly Dominican Republic, but it could have an affectation in trade and overall, for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Fortunately, we haven't had a major incident in the last couple of years that I remember. But again, it could affect too. And weather, it's tricky because of the tropical landscape. You will see far more rain that you want to, but again, it's a tropical rain. I don't know if we have somebody from Seattle, but yeah, you know how it feels. Now, going on the consumer on the trends, as I said, consumer and time saving is something that is growing, and it's strange because this is something that we saw in Mexico 10 years ago. We have more ready to eat, ready to serve, or ready to finish, ready to drink products are starting to get there. We saw in popcorn there you have more popped popcorn, ready to eat, going in a bag. Um, Online grocery shopping is starting and becoming prevalent with delivery apps. Value for money, private label. Private label, again, careful with this one because it's an affordable alternative to large brands. And we have seen many US companies that offer private label, but their costs are not as low as the local option. Health and wellness, we start to see some organic in some countries, but again, it's not as widespread. And the quality and added value products again, and this I think is a Super 99. This was taken 4 years ago. And this is one of the strange things. I think I'm not remember if I don't remember if it's Panama or Costa Rica, but the racing and dry food industry there is huge, and they have displays that we don't have in other countries. So you can see all the brands. You see Mariani there, you see other brands that are there. But again, it's unique. It doesn't mean that all the brands develop the same. So that was something interesting there. Now there are many retail chains. One of the most relevant news uh, in trade generally is that supermarket, uh, I think La Torre, they're called Grupo Calleja. They acquired Grupo Éxito in Colombia. So a Guatemalan retailer purchased the largest Colombian retailer. So they became huge. They are restructuring right now, but that's a good player to take attention to. Again, it's Grupo Calleja with a double L and a J. Uh, Again, that's something that you want to consider in the future, and that's a group that we're targeting for trade missions because now their purchasing power will become, big. Colombia is 40 million people, almost the size of all Central America. Now you combine those, the largest market in Guatemala with the largest retailer in Colombia, they can become a very, they will become a good player in the region. Now, here are some brands that are listed. Belize, we don't cover much Belize, but Costa Rica, we do. They have Walmart. Actually, we just talked to the buyers recently, Automercado, which is a supermarket chain, good to work with. AMPM, which is more a convenience store, and PriceSmart. PriceSmart is similar to, I would say, it's a Costco from the 80s. So they have larger products, but they're independent. Oh no, sorry, I am lying. That's not what I'm saying. No, PriceSmart actually is a Costco. They have deals with the corporation, with Costco Corporation, and I don't know what happened, but basically they are named as PriceSmart and they're regional. They have a good purchase power there, but they carry a lot of the Costco's portfolio. You can find Kirkland products there at PriceMart, and they are in different countries. They're in Costa Rica, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, and they go all the way to Colombia. So that's a good format for club, the cash and carry. But they are related to Costco, but they're not. So eventually, there are opportunities in this format and with these buyers. Their buying offices, if I'm not mistaken, are in Costa Rica. I think they're in Costa Rica. I need to go back on that one. Guatemala, with all this that I mentioned before, Honduras as well, Nicaragua. You can see Walmart has a good footprint in the region. And Panama, they have Ray, Super 99. Those two chains actually are evolving and they're modernizing, so they should have a different approach and bring more imported products in the future. Riva Smith is the one that is like a Costco in the 80s or 90s, but they're also bringing new products, and it's a good company to work with. They're a smaller retailer. They're focused on the medium high end, but they're good to work with. So again, that's a name that I would probably put in my list, Riva Smith. And we need to reconnect because we have a trade mission coming to Mexico in December, and we're planning to buy one or two regional buyers from this area, Central South America. And I don't want to commit it, but we'll target Riva Smith and all the others that I mentioned. Now, about trade shows, unfortunately, there are not relevant trade shows, or I would not recommend to go to trade shows there. The one that actually covers the whole region is the Food and Beverage Show in Miami in September. USDA, the agricultural trade offices, all of them are organizing trade missions, trade delegations going to that show. So you will find at least three to five buyers from each relevant market in this region. So that's something that you want to consider. The America's Food and Beverage Show. There's a link. And also we have our trade mission in December. We still have some openings. So if you want to register for that one, we can work and just define what market and what product you want, or what buyer you want us to approach. We cannot guarantee that he will register, but we will look for it. What else do I have? Well, the resources similar to what I saw before, from the USDA page, you can check on each one of the countries. If you need the direct contact of the marketing specialist, we have some of them, but otherwise you can just access their website, and that's the way to go. But we can help you if you need an additional contact with USDA. Again, they have a contact databases, but they don't like to give them away. They rather have them, deliver contacts with a purpose or with a plan, and they're happy to assist. They're very good people to work with, all across the board. So they're very nice and very helpful. So you want to consider them as well. And just to conclude, because wow, it's been an hour. As I said, there are 3 markets in the region. There are others that could be explored if you have specific items that can be developed in these other markets. There are good Nicaraguan buyers. There are good Salvadorian buyers, but the market will be slow. So it would be more on a per case basis that you can consider these markets. Infrastructure, market size, and logistics can be a challenge. Added value, dairy, and refrigerated, ready-to-eat products have opportunity if the economic proposal makes sense. The landed cost, again. And as usual, we ask you to define priorities and have a market access strategy. I was in the US last week, and I heard that many times. I'm trying to expand outside my state. So going to Latin America makes sense. Well, it does if you want to open a whole new company. It's a new business. So it takes time. It takes a whole strategy behind it, and don't overlook the nuances and the details coming into these markets. And again, we're increasing the reach for buyers in Latin America, for inbound trade missions and outbound trade missions. So expect that we will have I don't like to say more robust, because I think they were robust before, but we will have more integration in all Latin America to this program with Gusara in the future. So that's my 2 cents.